All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about biotic interactions. How do we characterize different organisms interacting with each other in the environment? So, basic thing to think about with this unit, do animals actually help each other out? Is it always competition, or are there instances that organisms try to help each other for the better of both of their survival? So we're going to go through a couple different examples. I'm going to characterize these with different faces to show whether something is benefited. If it's benefited, it's going to be smiley face. If it is harmed, it's going to be a frowny face. And if it's unaffected, we're going to have like a kind of unaffected, kind of unassuming face, kind of like this. So the first interaction is predation. So predation is one organism preying on another. You can see this fox eating the rabbit. This is a interaction in which the fox gets a meal. The fox gets to live another day. So it's going to be pretty happy about this. It's going to be benefiting from this interaction. The rabbit, on the other hand, the rabbit doesn't get to survive. It doesn't get to reproduce. If it hasn't already, it doesn't get to reproduce. So we'd say that this is a bad interaction for a harmful interaction for the rabbit. So this happens a lot. Typically, we see predators are going to be the organisms that have things like sharp teeth, stingers, claws, things made for hunting. Also, one thing you can do is if you look at predator and prey, prey are going to have eyes on the opposite sides of their head so that they can see prey or predators a lot easier, versus predators, which are going to have eyes ahead and are going to be mainly used for hunting. The next example is competition, and this involves organisms fighting for different resources. So in this food web, you can see we have a couple different layers. We have this mix over here with the insects, the toads, the birds, and the snakes, and we also have this with all of the herbivores, the foxes, and the owls. In this case, competition is going to lead to detriments on both sides. Both of these organisms have to utilize resources to get more resources. And what's going to happen is this fighting is going to lead to downsides on both sides. So for example, the fox and the owl both have to compete for the same food, which means that they're going to be fighting against one another, so they are less likely to get food because of this. So you often see competition. There's a lot of generalists that will have to compete because they have so much in common. There's going to be a lot of fighting between the two of them. So how do we avoid this? Well, the easiest way is to develop a niche, or a niche. I've heard them pronounced both ways. A niche is a specialized role that an organism is going to play in the environment. So this is like if you have a job at work where you do something that no one else does. Each person has their special role in the company, whether it's the stocking clerks or the cashiers or the janitors or the managers or the CEO. Each one has their own role to play. Same thing in this. You can see our angry birds here. We have 3 sections of tree, the top, the middle, and the bottom. The yellow bird is only going to inhabit the top of the tree. The red bird inhabits the middle. Maybe it likes the middle boughs the most because there's the most shade or the most protection with all of the leaves. And the bluebirds are going to inhabit the lower branches and the trunk. So even though all 3 of these have the same fundamental niche, they all live in the same tree, they are all going to have different realized niches. They're very specific choices. So the yellow birds will barely interact with the red birds. Usually it would only happen here where they're starting to mix. Same thing, the red and the blue would only mix a little bit. So we'd have a little bit of competition to establish kind of boundaries. But in general, these species are not going to have to fight one another because they all occupy different areas. Same thing if we look at resource partitioning. Resource partitioning means that we're going to separate food and different resources among different areas. So the flamingo has really long legs and a really long neck, so it can reach down in deep waters to get food off of the pond floor. The ducks, while they don't have the long necks or the long legs, they can dive. So they are able to reach things that are kind of deep, but maybe not as deep as the flamingo. The avocet, a type of shorebird, has long legs, but not necessarily that long neck, so it can pick things out of kind of this shore area. Oyster catchers don't have these long legs, so they are more likely to exist over here where the water meets the sand. And plovers, another type of shorebird, so all of these are different types of shorebirds except kind of the duck. The plovers, typically, they have really short legs, really short necks, so they are more likely to inhabit the sandy areas. So you can see with these niches, we have different traits. So these traits better help them to survive in their specific area. So the flamingos, because they inhabit this niche, they're more likely to reach down farther than any other species to get it. So we can see adaptations playing a role in this. Same thing with Darwin's finches. All of these different birds, while they evolved from a common ancestor, they all developed different beak shapes to avoid competition. So the ground finches here developed very large, very sturdy beaks that they can use to crack open seeds, whereas things like this woodpecker finch or the warbler finch are more likely to eat insects, so they have more long, narrow beaks. The vegetarian finch has kind of a scissor beak for cutting up leaves, whereas if I jump back to the woodpecker finch, it does have a very strong beak that it's able to break open pieces of wood to get the insects from inside. So all of these not only reference competition, but show adaptations that help to benefit that competition, to help them diversify so they aren't constantly fighting with each other. Even if they may live on the same island, they're not going to be fighting for the same resources. There are other interactions, and we consider these to be symbiotic. Symbiotic, sometimes it will mean beneficial. So if we have a symbiotic relationship, typically two sides are going to benefit. It could, in this case, though, mean just two organisms in general. So we have three different examples. We have commensalism, mutualism, and parasitism. Commensalism is when one organism is going to benefit while the other one is completely unaffected. So I'll show examples here in a second of all three of these. Mutualism, both sides are going to be benefiting. This is a win-win for both sides. Parasitism, kind of like predation, we've got one organism is going to benefit from it, the other one is going to be harmed from it. If we look at a couple examples, commensalism would be like birds living in trees. The trees don't really care that the bird is there, as long as they're not doing anything to harm the tree, but the bird gets shelter out of it, so it's pretty happy about the exchange. Mutualism, a good example if you've ever seen Finding Nemo, Nemo and his anemone, both of them are going to benefit. The clownfish gets protection from other fish because the anemone has stinging cells. The anemone gets food because clownfish are kind of messy eaters. So anything that doesn't get eaten by the clownfish is going to be eaten by the anemone. Parasitism, if you've ever experienced mosquitoes, ticks, lice, bed bugs, any of those are typically considered parasites because they are getting some sort of gain while another organism is being harmed. So these can transmit things like diseases, as well as they are draining the blood from another organism to benefit themselves. So, take a moment. What type of interaction would this be classified as? Okay, so this is mutualism. We have the bee and we have the flower. Bees in pollination, the flower is typically going to be very happy with this because they are spreading their pollen. They are getting their seed out and dispersed so that they can reproduce. The bee typically gets some sort of benefit from this, typically in the source of nectar and pollen, which it can use for making honey and feeding the colony. So overall, this interaction is a win-win for both sides. What about this one? What type of interaction would it be? So this one is competition. We have some species of deer that are fighting for a mate. So they are both using their energy to fight one another, to prove their dominance, so that one of them inevitably gets the mate, assuming either of them gets the mate. So both of these are going to be expending resources, and they're both going to be downsides. What about this example? So we have an ant that appears to be dead with a mushroom actually coming out of its head. So this is an example of parasitism. We have an ant that is infected with the cordyceps mushroom. The cordyceps, Orpheocordyceps unilateralis, I believe is the scientific name. If you've ever seen The Last of Us, this is the mushroom that is used in that video game. But we have this mushroom that is growing out of this dead organism. So as a spore, it will go into the ant and affect its nervous system, its locomotion, its movement. And over time, this ant will be controlled into going to a very high point. So a high leaf or something like that. The ant will latch on, and over time it will die. The mushroom will spread out. It will grow out of the ant and spread its spores for more individuals to be infected. So that is the reproductive cycle of this mushroom. What about this? We have a shark and a remora. So what type of interaction is this? So this is commensalism. So these are not actually cleaner fish. These fish just kind of hitch a ride on other organisms to benefit off of any food that's left over. The shark is not getting a benefit out of this guy being here, but this guy is getting a meal if the shark happens to leave something laying. So this is commensalism. What type of interaction is this? So this would be predation. We actually have two species of praying mantis here, or two individual praying mantises here. This one is a female. I believe this one is also a female, but it's kind of hard to tell. But we have one organism that is eating the other, so this female benefits while this one does not get to survive. What type of interaction is this? So this is actually mutualism. So this could be kind of mutualism, kind of commensalism, but we have a crocodile here who is actually getting its teeth cleaned by the bird. This is kind of like the dentist for the alligator. And this alligator is going to have its teeth cleaned, so it's happy about it. Any parasites or any pieces of food that were left in there that maybe cause issues, the bird is going to pick out. And as a result, the bird doesn't actually get eaten by this interaction. This is something that has evolved over many generations, this interaction. What type of interaction is this? So, just like the deer, this is competition. We have an egret and a cormorant. Both of them are going to be fish eaters, so they are in the same area fighting for the same food. Obviously, this cormorant is trying to scare off the egret, so this would be competition. And the last one. This is commensalism. So we have the humpback whale and the barnacles. The humpback whale doesn't really care that the barnacles are there. It may cause a slight inconvenience, but it's not going to be that big of a deal. The barnacles, however, get to hitch rides. So not only do they get new water currents to collect food out of, they also get the ability to transfer themselves to a different area. So they're going to move around. They're going to be able to reproduce through water currents. And overall, this is a good scenario for the barnacle. Not so much the whale. The whale doesn't really care one way or another, but the barnacles definitely get a benefit out of this. So, as a kind of summary for this lesson, what I'd like you to do is go through and in 3 to 5 sentences, how and why do organisms interact with another? So I'd like you to use 3 or 4 vocab words just to explain these interactions, but how and why do organisms interact with one another? So that's where we're going to end it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.